Yeah, so I heard about this today. This seemed really bad. But then one thing I was wondering though, like the whole day was, did it really say, like, what was the ruling actually, right? Because if the ruling was only that Trump's order wasn't like, didn't fit the criteria, needed to be edited, then that's not too bad. So let's see what the answer is here. Trump pulls unexpected victory from Supreme Court as birthright citizenship battle takes new turn. Really? Let's see it.
Bad for our nation. We're the only nation that does it. No other nation does that birthright citizenship. No, not even close. Some did it, they ended it. It's tremendously destructive. It's extremely costly.
So as you probably heard about already today, the Supreme Court made the rather atrocious decision to uphold birthright citizenship as it currently exists, which certainly was not unexpected, especially when we saw yesterday that they did not put up protective fencing around the Supreme Court, which was a strong indication that, hey, unlike the Roe v. Wade overturning where they did do that, clearly this is going to be a decision that the violent left-wing terrorists will enjoy very much so. And that said, there's no way to spin it. On paper, this is an excruciatingly bad thing for the United States. One could even argue existentially bad. But on the flip side, as someone who does not like to just sit around and complain about things with no solution, I think it's worth noting at the same time, this ruling is actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I'll explain what that means.
What I was thinking
first
too,
and foremost, you look at the margins and how unbelievably close this was. They said it was going to be a near unanimous decision. It turns out it was not, which does suggest, hey, going forward into the next decade or two, there is a lot of room for conservatives to make progress on this issue, even in that very same Supreme Court. But also, furthermore, very interestingly, the words here of Justice Kavanaugh seem to suggest a conclusion that was very similar.
Are there no? Okay, I'm curious. Hold on. I wonder. Okay. Anyway, sorry. I was doing some research on like the previous. I wanted to know, how they ruled on previous things. I understand
which
now.
is that while maybe these things cannot be single-handedly fixed via a Trump executive order, if Republicans in Congress would do something and codify more...
It's over. Video's over. That's it. That's it. It's not happening. It's like...
Maybe these things cannot be single-handedly fixed via a Trump executive order. If Republicans in Congress would do something and codify more specific laws around this stuff, maybe birthright citizenship for illegal aliens and Chinese tourists and all these issues is not a legal guarantee and is a battle we could fight again. But of course, that also would require the Rhino Republicans in Congress who don't do anything to do something, right? Just like yesterday we said, hey, you could solve this immediately if Republicans pass the SAVE Act. What Kavanaugh has suggested is Republicans in Congress could clarify some stuff on birthright citizenship into federal law, and I, at least as a Supreme Court justice, would rule on your side in that indication. But hey, that also suggests that we have a lot of fighting to do because it mandates the Republicans to do something. But still, either way, I want to discuss this issue today in full. I mean, we'll go over the ruling as many have already, but let's also kind of explain what the way here is going forward besides complaining. And please understand, I'm not even just sitting around like coping, trying to make excuses. I'm actually laying out specific reasons why, hey, maybe this is not, it's pretty terrible. Okay, I'm not going to talk away around that, but maybe this is not actually as settled of an issue legally as it seemed to be earlier today. Let's talk about why, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, we've been over the birthright citizenship issue a few times in the past year, but just to briefly recap the arguments here, It is one of the greatest misnomers in all of American history, politics, and civic understanding that the 14th Amendment was designed to give citizenship to anyone born on U.S. soil. It was specifically written for the children and for the slaves that were freed, obviously, following the Civil War. But even those specific words that people seem to ignore, right? Subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Paraphrasing here almost exactly, right? But it's like, the 14th Amendment reads what? All persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. What does that mean? Well, even reading the original text and the original Senate debates around the 14th Amendment, you understand that the framers actually addressed this issue. And they said, for example, yes, obviously people who are in this country on a temporary basis, that being, for example, at the time, people like foreign emissaries and people like that, obviously their and they literally said this in the debates, right? Their children would not be citizens because they're not subject to the jurisdiction, the legal jurisdiction of the United States. And by the way, even many of the 1800s court rulings that kind of came up against this issue, right, of things like immigration or even Native American citizenship, that was another issue that you may remember. That's not covered by the 14th Amendment. Those people are born on U.S. soil technically, but it wasn't until Congress passed the separate law in 1924 to give Indian citizenship that they had citizenship. Why is that? Because they were never considered subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And even
so, how did this happen then? It's just making shit up, basically.
This court ruling that you could say is a little more liberal. It's what liberals and pro-birthright citizenship people try to cite. Wong Kim Ark, that being the 1898 case that sort of builds the modern understanding of birthright citizenship, never even went that far. In fact, what it specifically said is that you have to still have permanent domicile, and that's sort of the phraseology they're used, right? Permanent domicile in the United States to be considered eligible to give birthright citizenship on to someone who was born there. And the reason that whole court case came up is because you had this guy, Wong Kim Ark. He was a Chinese guy who was born in the United States to immigrant parents in the 1800s, right? So these people are here on a long-term basis. The lines of immigration are a little bit blurred back then, but it's basically what we might consider at the time to be a legal immigrant. And eventually, years later, they all go back to China. Wong Kim Ark later tries to come back to America, and the United States tries to deny him, saying that you were never a citizen, even though you're born on U.S. soil. And again, what the Supreme Court said is that, well, because he was born to children of immigrants with permanent domicile in the United States, that person therefore can be considered a birthright citizen, which I would point out. People who cite Wong Kim Ark as the legal basis for total birthright citizenship still are not actually correct, because you have to have that permanent domicile. In other words, you have to be what? According to a ruling that even some conservatives might disagree with, what does even that one say?
Yeah.
That effectively you have to actually be an immigrant to the United States in order to be able to pass down birthright citizenship. And when I use the word immigrant, I mean that directly, right? Because it's worth noting, the word immigrant has a specific definition. You know, we love to use this thing, leftists, I should say, love to do this thing where anyone in the United States for any reason, that includes illegal aliens, quote unquote, undocumented immigrants, as they call them, or tourists, or people on student visas, work visas, or immigrants. That's not true. An immigrant has a specific purpose, which is that, a definition, I should say, which is a person who permanently moves from one country to another country on a permanent basis. By the way, we have a specific definition and category for that legally in modern U.S. law. They are, guess what? Green card holders. What is the specific legal term for a green card holder? That is, of course, a legal permanent resident, an immigrant, because they're here on a permanent basis, which is to say, first of all, if we're to apply even the Wong Kim Ark, maybe more liberal understanding from the 1800s to today, all it would basically suggest is that, yes, the children of green card holders born on U.S. soil can be considered natural-born U.S. citizens. It does not apply to people here on a temporary basis.
Yeah, people that come here on a fucking vacation, right? So, like, even if you were to, like you said, even if you were to take that previous case that happened to its maximum, it still would not cover those other people.
So,
and yet we use it for the most liberal, like the most open interpretation of it possible.
That with illegal aliens, you're talking about people who,
wait, Hassan's parents came here to have Hassan, and then they had Hassan, and then they used Hassan to get citizenship. No, that's not real. There's no way. I don't fucking believe this. Wait, Hassan didn't even grow up in the United States? Oh my god, so you're telling me like the number one biggest menace to you, like the biggest political menace, like terrorism supporter guy, is he wasn't even like raised in the United States? But like you happened to be born, he just happened to be born here because his parents came to you. Oh my god, bro. So they didn't come here for, okay, we gotta tell the truth here. His parents were not, I don't know, but there's no evidence that his parents came here specifically for birth tourism. Apparently they were kind of here already, not, okay, hold on. His parents had U.S. connections already. His mother attended university in the U.S., pursued advanced studies. His father is a scientist. The birth technically occurred in the United States, but he lived in Turkey like basically his entire childhood. He didn't move to the U.S. until he was 17. Strategically for college. Bro. But his parents weren't citizens at the time. Wait, so how did his parents get citizenship then? Did they? Are his parents citizens even? Wait, it says here, hold on. So wait, was Hassan's parents citizens when Hassan was born? So wait, hold on. It's actually possible. Nobody knows.
Who the fuck is Leaflit?
The timeline is really tight here. So it is possible. Yeah, I'm trying to be truth seeking here, right? I'm trying not to bullshit. But like it seems that it's really sketch. So it's like prior analysis public records state that his parents were US citizens by when he was born. Wait, dual status. Dude, we need to get rid of this. This is bullshit. Dual status. It's honestly ambiguous. It's honestly ambiguous. But the thing that is true, though, the thing that we know for sure, is that Hassan didn't even live in the U.S. until he was 17. In time for college, basically. That we know for sure.
Very often, back in the day, they used to overstay tourist visas, things like that. They're not classified by the State Department as immigrants. They're just people who have illegally intruded into the country and need to be removed. But people with illegal alien status, not here with permanent domicile, not legal permanent residence, right? They shouldn't be protected by birthright citizenship. TPS, temporary protective status, like, for example, the Haitian migrants, the Haitian illegal aliens here in the United States, temporary protected status. It's in the name. They do not have permanent domicile. Same goes for people on student visas, work visas, things like that. These are all types of, this is a visa category from the U.S. State Department called a quote-unquote non-immigrant.
Yeah, so basically it's hard to know if, because, okay, so from what I'm reading, and it's very vague, because, and the reason it's vague is because citizenship records aren't really public. So whether or not his parents were citizens at the time he was born is unknown. It is within the time frame, it is possible that they were citizens when he was born, but then there's no proof of it either way. So that's why it's confusing.
Immigrant visa, which means non-permanent basis here in the United States. They shouldn't be getting birthright citizenship. And of course, maybe the most extreme example of this all in the 21st century is this issue of birth tourism, which happens from a lot of places, but it's very heavily coming from China, where you'll have people who literally let's say, have a tourist, they get a tourist visa very often, and this is a practice widespread. It's happening in the thousands. It's very concerning. It's a major national security issue for the United States. But basically, especially like wealthier Chinese people, what they're doing is they're getting tourist visas to the United States when the wife or whatever is pregnant. Very often, they don't even come to our mainland. Oftentimes, they're going to places like American Samoa and Guam and things close to China, right? Give birth to the baby on U.S. soil. The baby automatically has U.S. citizenship.
Yeah,
and that can't be revoked because it's natural born U.S. citizenship, right? Then they
it's like a total. It's like the most obvious. This is the thing that's so irritating about it. Everybody knows this is a loophole. The most retarded person in the United States knows that this is that this is a loophole, that they're profiting from this loophole, and that it's obviously has security concerns. And yet, like, we have this system. Like, why? Why don't we just get rid of it? Like, everybody, like, this is so obviously a fucking joke. Like, why is it? If the government can't agree on this, what the fuck can they agree on? Am I right? If the government can't even do this, how can they be trusted to do literally anything else?
Go back to China. That kid, his entire life is raised Chinese, only speaks Chinese, only knows Chinese as his country and all that, right? But they have U.S. citizenship. So if they want to come here and study or even be hostile agents to take over the country, which is clearly something you'd have to assume is widely happening here, right? According to the Supreme Court today, that is considered, that's what the 14th Amendment was for. Clearly, the framers of the 14th Amendment who explicitly said, this is not meant even for foreign visitors and things like that. Clearly, yeah, birth tourism, that should absolutely be a thing.
I hope you have air conditioner.
This is ridiculous. This ruling is, of course, ridiculous, and that is what Justice Alito specifically points out. Even if you want to be a little bit looser and say, okay, maybe even the children of an illegal alien who's been here a long time and the kid grew up in the United States, maybe can they receive birthright citizenship? Which I disagree with. But even if you want to say that, the idea that this birth tourism thing is a thing, right? The idea that just because you give birth to a baby on U.S. soil as a tourist...
Then you want to tell me that the government says that they just need more money? That if we just give them more money, they'll solve all our problems? If we just give them more money, we give them more power, that they'll solve everything? They can't even solve the most basic function, the most basic thing that everybody knows is bullshit. They can't even fix that. They can't even fix that. They can't even keep like citizens safe from fucking domestic terrorism or anything that they should be protecting people from. They can't even do it. But they're like, give us more money and more power and we'll fix everything. Bro. It's like they have one job and there's like a ton of people working there, right? And I'm like, what are you guys even fucking doing?
That baby clearly, indisputably, how could you even not argue that that baby is a U.S. citizen is ridiculous? That's exactly what Alito pointed out today in his dissent.
This is his separate dissent. He said the court's interpretation also has national security implications. Suppose that a person's only connection to this country is that he was born here to a mother who was present just long enough to give birth and then quickly return to her native country. Suppose that country is a strategic adversary or enemy of the United States. Suppose the child never visited the United States while growing up and was inculcated with hatred of this country. According to this court now, that person is a citizen of the United States. He can enter and leave the country as he pleases. He can travel the world on a United States passport. Even if he plots to harm this country, he cannot be deprived of his status as a citizen, at least under current precedent. He goes on to say that this decision today also provides a powerful incentive to enter or remain in this country illegally. He goes on to say, in my judgment, the court has made a mistake that will seriously affect the country's future.
Yeah, and please understand that this is not even hypothetical. It's not a question of it might happen. It's already happening. This Chinese birth tourism thing is incredible.
Oracle of Hecate, thanks so much for the 100. As someone who lives on this side of the planet, I can tell you that only super wealthy Chinese people who are able to do this. They will hire multiple agencies to help them get through all the government red tape. The visa office normally denies women if they are 2 months pregnant.
Incredibly widespread, and no longer is it even just an issue of Democrats trying to use second generation illegal aliens as, a future demographic way to take over the country, which they are, and is already bad enough, right? That's already big enough of an issue. But it's also now a direct national security thing, where basically we have all these like Chinese agents with American citizenship that we can't even revoke because it's not a naturalized citizenship, it's a natural born, and this is all fine according to the Supreme Court. So massively problematic, to say the least, and that's putting it lightly. That's exactly why Donald Trump said today on Truth Social, I would like to congratulate President Xi and the great country of China on their massive birthright citizenship win, which is exactly what this all is. But with that in mind, we understand how bad this is. Let's also, though, ask the question of what are we going to do about it? And while, again, I'm not surprised by this, and it's not a good thing whatsoever, and it is a race against the clock, which makes it equally concerning because we could solve this in 100 years from now, but that might be obviously too late. But why there could be grounds for optimism on the same side. And that's first and foremost the fact that contrary to what you might have heard earlier today, in reality, the ruling was about 5-4, really 5-3-1. I guess you could put it that way. Because as you can see here, the majority was 5. Barrett and Roberts joining the libs, not surprising, right? Amy Coney Barrett, just a total disaster she is. Sean Roberts, obviously, too, but he's sort of been known as the centrist vote on the court. But Amy Coney Barrett, for whatever reason, I guess because she has adopted kids from Haiti or something, decides all of America has to burn because she wants to be emotional and mad at Trump or something. But you know how it goes.
Oracle, fuck, I did this from the 100. Thank you. But let's be real, Chinese minors are not the real problem. They're not the drivers of crime and economic leeches. No, it doesn't matter where they're from, to be honest. It really doesn't. It's the fact that it's a loophole. It doesn't really matter. The fact that it even exists in the first place is ridiculous.
But you may notice that Kavanaugh's name is not there. Instead, Kavanaugh wrote a concurrence. And here is what Kavanaugh stated. He did not, for example, uphold birthright citizenship as it's currently understood as a concept. Rather, he wrote the following, quote, Congress could, consistent with the 14th Amendment, amend Section 1401 or otherwise to enact new legislation establishing exceptions to birthright citizenship for children born to foreign citizens unlawfully or temporarily in the country. But Congress has not yet done so. Kavanaugh then goes on to explain why he believes the majority is wrong. And so you may know that Kavanaugh oftentimes is not as bad as Barrett, but can have some sort of more liberal tendencies on the court. But what he basically argued today is that, well, President Trump doesn't have the ability to sign an executive order to just change the rules on birthright citizenship, which,
I need the next judge to be like an angry as fuck Uncle Ruckus. That's what we need. That needs to be the next judge. If that's not the next judge, I don't know what
I can understand that position because the entire point of Trump's executive order from day one was to bring a Supreme Court case on birthright citizenship, right? That was what the entire point of it was. But what he is saying here is that he does not believe that he's basically saying my ruling today or my concurrence is not stating Constitution.
Have you guys ever seen a documentary on Clarence Thomas? Dude's like amazing, actually.
Birthright citizenship applies to everyone. Rather, it's the job of Congress to pass federal laws regulating what that birthright citizenship actually means. And so I did see, for example, today Rand Paul suggested, we could file a new constitutional amendment to fix the birthright citizenship thing. Obviously, constitutional amendment is completely unrealistic. It's very hard to get that done. You could try to do the convention of states or stuff like that, but let's be honest.
No one's going to do it.
You think the states are going to do that? You think we're going to rely on Republicans to do something very extraordinary? No. But the fact that basically what Kavanaugh is saying here is, hey, you may not need a constitutional amendment. The bar is much lower. Through federal law, through Congress, you could actually, for example, exempt illegal aliens from birthright citizenship or exempt Chinese tourists and people like that. That is huge. And that, by the way, just hands us a very big open opportunity to potentially say, maybe this is not as over as we think it is, and maybe there's actually a tangible...
How... Like, if we can't agree on this, if, like, hold on, what is... Yeah, we have a majority. So you're telling me we have a majority, and we can't do it? On, like, the most obvious thing that you should vote for, the most obvious thing, obvious loophole to close, and they can't even agree on this. How's that fucking... God, they're so
solution
useless.
to it. Now,
they're so useless.
I'm not going to sit here and say the issue will be fixed tomorrow, because, you know, it's election year, midterm year. You need a pretty significant Republican trifecta, and as it currently stands, you think they're going to do something about birthright citizenship between now and the midterms? Absolutely not. But the reason why this leaves me with a little bit of optimism is it basically says, hey, the bar we have to clear to maybe at some point in the future, if we win 28 or 32 or something, to actually address birthright citizenship is a lot lower than maybe we previously thought, right? This is not actually an impossible task, although it's a difficult one, and it still would require the Republican Party to act. But by the way, that's also why it effectively sends the message, hey, rhinos, once again, you, just like with the election integrity stuff yesterday, you tried to rely on the Supreme Court, you couldn't, but it still is incumbent on you to actually do your jobs. For example, Trump put out the following, saying, the Supreme Court upheld birthright citizenship, which is too bad for our country, but we can easily make it up in Congress through legislation, not needing a full constitutional amendment, which is why, as I said, this maybe ruling, that's one reason why this ruling's not as bad as I thought it would be, right? With the support of the president that has now been determined during this process, no long and unwieldy constitutional amendment is necessary. Congress should start today to work on ending expensive and unfair to our country birthright citizenship. They will have my complete and total support. Now, much as, again, as you saw through the SAVE Act, I doubt that's happening anytime soon. But it does suggest with enough work, it's not out of reach as, say, a constitutional amendment would be. So, you know, if between now and the next decade we can convince the Republican Party to actually do something and like, do their jobs,
that's a fucking...
That's within reaching distance.
Convince them to do anything? Oh my goodness. Ugh.
On the flip side, immediately the Department of Justice and the Trump administration have announced that they're going to be starting basically a whole new task force and a new initiative into investigating and trying to prevent birth tourism, which is certainly a good thing. However, my issue with that is that, well, while, you know, it's a good thing to look at, under the Supreme Court definition, after birth tourism happens, what can you really do about it? I mean, you can ban the parents from re-entering the United States, sure, but the kid already has citizenship. According to the Supreme Court, that citizenship cannot be revoked. What can you even retroactively solve the issue? I'm not exactly sure. You know, do we going forward just have to, all tourists who come to the United States, you have to submit a pregnancy test or something? I'm not, which is ridiculous, right? But that's what the Supreme Court is basically forcing us into doing. I'm not exactly sure, but you know, you have that, of course, yes. But perhaps maybe my biggest source of...
Only Republicans can have all of the majorities on, like, the court, in the House, in the Congress, and just keep losing. Only Republicans can do it. Like, they're actually so amazing. It's actually incredible if you think about it.
Optimism on this. As Shady Vance pointed out today, is that it was widely speculated going in that this might be some type of 8-1 decision. Even when you took a listen to some of the oral arguments, it sounded like, well, and this is what the way liberals and birthright citizenship supporters were trying to frame it, right? Birthright citizenship is indisputable according to the 14th Amendment. There's no way it's going to be unanimous. This is a stupid case by Trump. And in the end, as you can see, it literally just came down to one vote, which sucks. I get it, yes. But that also does suggest, again, maybe we have a lot of work to do, sure, but we have less work or less ground to make up than previously expected. Because if it all came down to one vote on the Supreme Court, and understanding, you know, through the course of years, seats will change on the Supreme Court, maybe this is not as bad as we seem to think.
I do actually think there's a really big silver lining here, and that's the simple fact that a lot of legal experts expected this case to go the wrong direction by 7-2 or even 8-1. The fact that this case was a 5-4 decision effectively means that the concept of birthright citizenship, which is an absurdity to the 14th Amendment, that concept is hanging by a thread. And so what I take from that is, yes, we've got to fix the immigration system even more. We have to be even more aware of who's coming into our country to make sure that they're not benefiting from this atrocious Supreme Court ruling. But it also means that we have to keep fighting, Laura, because we actually have an opportunity to reverse this decision, just as we've reversed so many bad decisions throughout the generations.
My thoughts exactly. So what is the solution going forward? It's very simple. First of all, we cannot despair. We need to understand that, hey, it's within reach. We're a lot closer maybe than we think, but we're not there. And that's a very important distinction, obviously. But that secondly, conservatives need to start doing the political lobbying and organizing and action and all of those things that, for example, the pro-life movement did to overturn Roe v. Wade. I mean, look at how for a long time, you know, they had all that organization, the activism, the different pushes, Supreme Court lobbying, things like that, and then we get it done. But maybe the better example I might add to this is, say, the gun rights movement. You know, this is something we don't talk about a lot, but when you really break it down, how massively successful, let's be honest, the NRA and the wider just Second Amendment coalition has been over the past 40 years to really do a lot of boring work, right? You know, the occasional lobbying, political organizing, sort of working behind the scenes or in the shadows, low profile in many cases. It hasn't been glamorous. But look at how, for example, throughout the 1980s and 90s, there is a lot of like just mass gun control happening across America, both on the federal level, both on the state level. And that's when, of course, the grassroots Second Amendment community says, we're going to start doing the political organizing. And for many decades...
Listen, it says, will not be infringed in plain text. I'm not giving them a fucking... I'm not giving them a pass when there's like SBR laws and suppressor laws and all of this shit. I'm not giving them shit. I'm giving them zero credit.
It was sort of quiet, but of course in 2008, and this is like an example of how progress can be made on even in the Supreme Court, right? Never say it's done, never say it's a lost issue, because prior to 2008 in DC versus Heller, the Supreme Court rarely weighed in on Second Amendment issues, and in most cases they were ruling in favor of the gun control. While 2008, that starts to reverse itself. Supreme Court rules in favor of gun rights, and then ever since, you seem to notice, most Supreme Court or even federal court cases have started going in the favor of gun rights. That's not an accident. You know why that's happening? Because the pro 2A community, first of all, has effectively really lobbied hard to be in control of the Republican Party. And that's something you have to notice, because, for example, look at Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush's positions on the Second Amendment. Not nearly what the average Republican is today. That is no accident. That is because, in some ways, right, the 2A movement really got its teeth sunk deep in the Republican Party, and hence through different political...
Dude, I'm sorry I sound so, like, fucking black-pilled and doomer about this, but am I the only one that thinks this is ridiculous? Like, it says in plain text that it shall not be infringed, and yet we're celebrating that it only got infringed a little bit less than it could have been. Like, what? What are we talking about? Like, how do you not win this battle? Right? How do you not win this? Like, the Constitution's on your side on it and you still lose, kind of? Like, how does this work?
Organizing, right? In wider politics as a whole. They made sure, by the way, let's have 2A judges put in place. Let's make sure our legal teams are well funded, right? Again, all of just the very boring stuff to build the infrastructure around.
We build a fucking rocket, we go to Mars, and we leave everybody here.
Political organizing. But notice how successful that's been. Notice how over the past 10 to 20 years, there's been virtually no new gun control on the federal level, besides maybe some like few minor exceptions, but en masse, right? not a lot of gun control being accomplished anymore on the federal level, which is a huge
and then on Mars we find the mechs from Noah 0, and then we establish the Mars supremacy. That's the plan.
From what you saw in the 80s and 90s, among many states, by the way. Gun control, either in the courts or through legislatures, is being reversed, right? Constitutional carry, as one example, is growing nowadays to a lot of new states. So it's worth noting. I think that's actually a prime example. You want to see how to build a successful single issue based conservative movement? Look no further than guns and then the Second Amendment community, because they've actually done a really good job. And maybe a prime example there. If you asked them in the 1990s, they probably would have told you this is over for us, right? It's looking terrible. Now look at them in the span of just 20 to 30 years ever since. They're literally the people that are winning on the issue.
You don't think? Okay, let's ask. How long do you think it'll take before we have our first settlement on Mars with the progress SpaceX and AI is making? 15 to 25 years. That's actually longer than I thought. I don't like that. I want 10. Let's do 10. Let's
even Democrats kind of have accepted that the gun control is not happening anymore, right? On many levels. And maybe that's the model that we ought to follow. So this is all to say, in the same way they did for
on the bright side, we live in a world of AI now, and AI is going to hyper accelerate a lot of stuff. Honestly, we should watch some AI stuff. We'll do that
for guns. What needs to be the new project of the conservative movement now is overturning birthright citizenship, right? And in general, just immigration-based advocacy, because clearly this is an important issue to our country. We all understand that now.
Look, we already are. We can look at Europe. We can already see what's happening. Like, what are we doing?
Also notice a lot of the infrastructure around it, right? The think tanks, the action groups, special interest groups, things like that around the maybe new conservative position on immigration don't yet exist. We need to be building that infrastructure. We need to be doing that organizing. That's the key. That's the way out of this. Now, what I will also admit, and what's concerning at the same time, is that, well, unlike the Second Amendment, or unlike even like pro-life and abortion and the Roe v. Wade and those things, you know, you're in a special race against the clock when it comes to birthright citizenship, right? Because it is no use to overturn this decision in 100 years when all the damage is already done, right? All these Biden illegal aliens, they're all having their anchor babies, all the Chinese tourists, right? The numbers game. So that's also why we have to do it with a sense of urgency, especially, and why maybe this is not the same as, say, the gun rights movement, where you can kind of take your time and be patient, understanding you're going to win in the end, because we can't, right? If we take too long to solve this issue, we lose, even if we win on paper. So that can't happen either.
To AGI,
but
man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you besides that. Like, that is clearly our path forward. That's our way out of this, and that's kind of the only way to go. Is we have to be like the NRA, right? We have to start making it a sort of political project of ours to get this decision, which it's on the line. Okay, maybe a change of one or two justices could solve it, or different political circumstances even, right? We need to ensure our political project needs to be overturning this birthright citizenship nonsense in the Supreme Court. And as you clearly have seen, right, we sort of put something into the ecosystem today, into the ether today, right? It is possible, right? It is actually a disputed issue. It's not a settled issue at all. We already gained that credibility, but now is the point where, yeah, that sort of like long-term conservative political project needs to start. And we have the blueprint, we have the model for it, but it just needs something that needs to be enacted, right? So there you have it. Anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.
I hope that I'm wrong and that Vince is right. I really do. I want to be wrong on this one, but you know, it's kind of rough, man.
This is Dickman.